Most men do not lose their future in one dramatic failure. They lose it slowly in ordinary rooms around ordinary people, while laughing at the wrong things and calling it loyalty. A man can have discipline in the morning, ambition in his heart, and still be pulled backward by the people he lets sit too close to his life. That is how destruction often begins. Not with an enemy at the gate, but with a friend at the table. You know the type. The man who always has a joke ready when you speak about improvement. The one who says, "Relax, you're taking this too seriously," whenever you talk about your goals. The one who disappears when you need support, but shows up fast when it is time to mock your progress. At first, it seems harmless. You tell yourself he is just being honest, just keeping you grounded, just part of the crew. But over time, that kind of presence becomes a silent poison. It weakens your standards. It trains you to shrink. It makes mediocrity feel normal. And that is the real danger. Toxic friends do not always attack you with cruelty. Sometimes they attack you with comfort. They invite you to stay exactly where you are. They feed the version of you that avoids discomfort, delays responsibility, and fears standing alone. They laugh when you rise because your rise exposes their refusal to change. They speak like brothers, but deep down, they are attached to your failure because your growth would force them to face their own weakness. You can feel it in your body before you can explain it in words. After certain conversations, you feel heavier. After certain gatherings, your focus is gone. Your energy is scattered. Your mind is foggy. And if you are honest, you already know which relationships leave you stronger and which ones leave you dull, distracted, and doubtful. The question is not whether you see it. The question is whether you are willing to admit it. If this sounds familiar, take a second and like the video. Not for me, but for the man who needs the reminder that peace, discipline, and self-respect are worth protecting. Because the moment you stop tolerating what weakens you, everything in your life starts to shift. And once you see how deep this problem really goes, you will understand why walking away is not betrayal. It is the beginning of your return to strength. Toxic friends rarely arrive like obvious enemies. They come dressed as history, humor, and shared memories. They know your stories, they remember your weaknesses, and they use that familiarity like a weapon. At first, it feels harmless. A joke here, a little sarcasm there, a drink after work, a few lazy conversations that make you feel like you belong. But slowly, without announcing themselves, they begin to shape your mind. They train you to laugh at what should concern you. They teach you to lower your standards so nobody feels uncomfortable. And before long, you start confusing comfort with loyalty. That is the trap. Because every time you shrink yourself to keep the peace, you pay with your future. Every time you share a dream and they answer with a smirk, you learn to doubt your own ambition. Every time you take a serious step forward and they call you too intense, too changed, or too good for everybody, they are not teasing you. They are protecting the version of you that makes them feel safe. And the consequence is brutal. If you stay too long, their limits begin to feel like your identity. You can see it in the room. The man who once wanted more now laughs less, works less, and expects less. He speaks carefully, not because he is wise, but because he has been trained not to rise too high. He becomes the guy who always has a reason why he cannot move, cannot build, cannot leave. And when he looks around, he thinks he is surrounded by brothers. In truth, he is standing in a circle of people who benefit from his stagnation. There comes a moment when you hear the truth in a quiet sentence. Don't get too serious. Why are you trying so hard? Come on. One more night won't hurt. That is the voice of mediocrity asking you to stay loyal to your own decline. And if you keep answering that voice, you will wake up one day with a life that feels strangely borrowed. You do not need to become cold. You do not need to become arrogant. But you do need discernment. Because a man who cannot separate real brotherhood from emotional sabotage will always be easy to steer. And the first step toward changing that is admitting what these relationships have cost you. If this is hitting home, take a second and like the video so more people hear the truth. And ask yourself honestly, who in your life is sharpening you, and who is quietly wearing you down? Because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The dangerous thing about toxic friends is that they rarely arrive looking like enemies. They come laughing, joking, sharing the same old stories, making you feel comfortable enough to stop questioning what they are costing you. And that comfort can become a cage. One man grows, starts waking up earlier, eating better, reading again, praying again, training again, and the first voices he hears are not encouragement but sarcasm. You think you're better than us now? Relax, it's not that serious. Come on, one night won't hurt. That is how weakness protects itself. It does not attack your ambition directly. It laughs at it until you begin to laugh with it. And if you stay long enough, you begin to notice the pattern. Every time you move toward discipline, they pull you back toward distraction. Every time you talk about building something, they change the subject to comfort, women, entertainment, excuses, or memories of the past when none of you were responsible for anything. They are not always cruel. Sometimes they are even charming. That is why they are dangerous. They know how to make decline feel social. They know how to make stagnation feel like loyalty. But loyalty to destruction is not brotherhood. It is surrender. A man can sit in a room full of familiar faces and still be utterly alone in his purpose. He leaves the gathering heavier, not stronger. He goes home with his energy drained, his standards blurred, and his mind full of noise. Then the next morning he wonders why he feels behind in life. He wonders why his discipline keeps collapsing. He wonders why his confidence is so fragile. The answer is often sitting right beside him in the form of the people he keeps excusing. Real growth begins when you stop calling every connection a blessing. Some people are not in your life to build you. They are there to keep you manageable. They need you average so they don't have to face their own wasted potential. And once you see that clearly, the pain becomes useful. You no longer ask, how do I keep everyone? You start asking, who is actually helping me become the man I claim I want to be? That question changes everything. If this is hitting close to home, take a second and like the video, because this truth matters more than most people will ever admit. And ask yourself honestly, who in your circle leaves you stronger and who leaves you smaller? That answer will tell you more about your future than any motivational speech ever could. Because once you stop feeding the friendships that are quietly starving your life, you make room for something far more powerful, and that is where the next step begins. The hardest part is not recognizing a toxic friend. The hardest part is admitting what that friendship has already cost you. It costs time, and time is the one thing a man never gets back. It costs focus, because every hour spent entertaining someone else's drama is an hour stolen from your own discipline, your own family, your own future. And it costs identity, because after years of being around people who joke about your goals, question your standards, and call your growth changed, you slowly begin to doubt yourself. That is how mediocrity wins. Not with a loud attack, but with quiet erosion. You start to notice it in small moments. You share an idea, and instead of encouragement, you get a smirk. You mention a plan to improve your health, your business, your marriage, your finances, and someone says, "Don't get too serious," as if discipline were a betrayal. They laugh when you talk about wanting more, but it is the kind of laughter that hides envy. They do not want to build. They want company in stagnation, and if you are not careful, their comfort becomes contagious. A strong man understands a painful truth. Not everyone who has history with you deserves a place in your future. There are men who know your old self so well that they resent your new one. They were comfortable with you when you were uncertain, distracted, easy to influence. But the moment you begin to sharpen your mind, protect your energy, and raise your standards, they feel judged. So they begin to pull. A sarcastic comment here, a guilt trip there, a reminder of how you used to be whenever you try to rise. That is not brotherhood. That is resistance. And this is where many good people fail themselves. They stay out of loyalty, but loyalty without wisdom becomes self-betrayal. They keep answering every call, attending every pointless gathering, laughing at the same tired jokes, pretending not to notice the drain. Then one day they wake up and realize their life has become a reflection of the people around them. Their ambition is smaller. Their energy is lower. Their standards are blurred. So ask yourself honestly, when you leave certain people, do you feel peace or do you feel relief? That answer tells you almost everything. If this is hitting close to home, maybe it is because deep down you already know the truth. Maybe you have been excusing what your spirit has been rejecting for years. And if that is the case, you do not need more permission. You need resolve. Because the next step is not just to recognize the damage. It is to decide that your future matters more than their approval. There comes a point in a man's life when he has to look around the room and ask a hard question. Are these people helping me become stronger, or are they quietly training me to stay small? Because toxic friends rarely announce themselves with obvious cruelty. More often, they arrive with jokes that wound, advice that weakens, and a strange irritation every time you talk about discipline, business, faith, or self-respect. They smile while they sabotage. They laugh while they lower your standards. And if you are not paying attention, you begin to confuse familiarity with loyalty. That is how the trap works. You keep showing up for people who never show up for your growth. You answer every call, sit through every complaint, and tolerate every insult because you tell yourself that's what good men do. But good men are not meant to be emotional dumpsters for people committed to their own decline. When your circle mocks your ambition, they are not protecting you from disappointment. They are protecting themselves from being left behind. Your progress exposes their excuses, and that makes them uncomfortable. Think about how many men lose years in rooms where every dream gets laughed at before it can breathe. A friend says, "Come on, relax," when you choose discipline. Another says, "You've changed," when you stop drinking every weekend. Another jokes, "Don't get too serious," when you start building something meaningful. But what they call seriousness is often just self-respect. What they call change is often awakening. And what they call loyalty is often a cage. The consequences are never immediate, which is why so many men ignore them. A weak circle doesn't destroy you overnight. It drains you slowly. It makes your mind noisy, your habits inconsistent, your standards negotiable. You begin to second-guess your goals because everyone around you treats average like a personality. You stop speaking with conviction. You stop moving with purpose. And one day you wake up and realize you have been living as the smallest version of yourself just to keep company with people who were never building anything. If that picture feels uncomfortable, good. Discomfort is often the first sign that truth has entered the room. Maybe it is time to stop calling every old connection a brotherhood. Maybe it is time to admit that some friendships survive only because you are afraid of the silence that comes after them. But silence, when used well, is not punishment. It is space. Space to think clearly. Space to heal. Space to rebuild your standards so that your next circle is worthy of the man you are becoming. And once you start seeing it, you cannot unsee it. The question is no longer whether they are draining you. The question is how much longer you are willing to let them. And this is where the truth becomes unavoidable. The life you keep is often a reflection of the company you refuse to leave. If you are still surrounded by men who laugh at discipline, mock your goals, and only call when they need something, then every day you stay is a quiet vote against your own future. At some point, wisdom stops being a feeling and becomes a decision. You stop asking, "How long can I tolerate this?" and start asking, "What is this costing me?" Because toxic friendship rarely announces itself with obvious cruelty. More often, it comes dressed as familiarity, old memories, and jokes that cut a little too deep. It says, "Don't change," when you are finally becoming stronger. It says, "Relax," when your conscience is trying to wake you up. It says, "You've changed," the moment you begin to outgrow the version of yourself they benefited from. And if you are not careful, you confuse that resistance with loyalty. But loyalty to people who are committed to keeping you small is not loyalty. It is self-betrayal. There comes a moment in every man's life when he must sit alone in a quiet room and admit what his circle has been doing to his spirit. Has it made you sharper or softer? More disciplined or more distracted? More respected or more available for disrespect? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary ones. A weak circle will always demand your presence, but never protect your purpose. And if you keep answering their call, you will eventually stop hearing your own. So yes, cut them off. Not out of hatred, but out of clarity. Not because you are proud, but because you are finally serious. Some bridges are not burned. They are surrendered to time because they lead nowhere worth going. The pain of walking away is temporary. The regret of staying too long can follow you for years. If this message struck something deep in you, take it as a sign that your standards are waking up. If you agree that a man must protect his mind, his mission, and his future, then give this video a quiet like so this message reaches someone who needs it. And tell me this, what is one toxic pattern you are finally ready to leave behind? If you are done living beneath your potential, subscribe now, because the road ahead is about building the kind of strength that cannot be borrowed, faked, or taken away.